Okay, hello, everybody. It's good to see everybody back in class. All right, so today we're just going to have a review for the exam. The exam is on Wednesday. And so the exam will cover chapters 1, 3, and 4. And I graded all your homework over the weekend. So everything on Moodle should be up to date. And so let me pull up the study guide here. So there are a couple of people with extenuating circumstances. So I am recording this lecture if you wanted to. I will post it on Moodle if you want to go back and take a look at it while you're studying. All right, let's see here. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the exam will be multiple choice. There's about 35, 36 multiple choice questions. And it's concept questions and problems. So make sure that make sure that you've read the material. You need to know the concepts in addition to how to do the problem. So what I would do, the best way to study for this exam, I think, is to start by going over the PowerPoints and the notes. And then whatever's mentioned in the PowerPoints and on the notes, also read those sections in the book as well. I guess also the best way to begin studying is just to focus on the study guide that's posted here and what I'm going to go over in class today, and make sure that you know those concepts. So as I mentioned last week, the exam's multiple choice, and I'm aware that, I mean, personally, I remember back from when I was in college, some of these multiple choice questions can be kind of confusing. If you know the material, it's going to be easy for you, but if you're kind of unsure about the material, then it's easy to get confused. So I'm going to give you some specific guidance on what to focus on. All right, so for chapter 1, make sure that you read in the textbook those different forms of organization. That's the sole proprietorship, partnership, and corporation. And make sure that you understand the advantages and the disadvantages of each. So there's several concept questions, multiple choice questions about those. What are the advantages, disadvantages of the different forms of organization? So keep in mind, the sole proprietorship and a partnership, those have the same advantages and disadvantages. A corporation, of course, has different advantages and disadvantages. So make sure you read that section of the book and go back over the notes. All right, and then we also talked about, and there's mentioned in the book, conflicts that managers and shareholders can have. So make sure that you know what those conflicts are, the conflicts between shareholders and managers, what they are, and how can you solve those conflicts? How can you mitigate those conflicts? There's also conflicts between bondholders and stockholders. So make sure you know what those conflicts are and how those can be mitigated. Okay, then there's a section on ethics, business ethics. Make sure you read that section in the back of the chapter. And then the goal of a corporation. What is the primary goal of a corporation? So what is the primary goal of a corporation? maximize wealth, to maximize shareholders' wealth. So to maximize shareholder wealth. So, I mean, the obvious thing that people would think, I mean, if you ask somebody on the street, what's the goal of a corporation? They'd probably say to make a profit. But the goal of a corporation is to maximize shareholder wealth, because who are the owners of the company? The shareholders, right? The shareholders are the owners of the company, and their goal is to increase their wealth. They want to make as much money as they can from their investment. So the goal of a corporation is to maximize shareholder wealth. How is that done? How is shareholder wealth maximized? Well, yes, but I mean, I'm more obvious than that. If I'm a stockholder, if I buy stock in ABC company, how do I make money in that stock? Yes, when the price goes up. So the goal of a corporation is to maximize shareholder wealth. And the way that's done is by maximizing the stock price. So the goal of a corporation is to maximize the stock price. But along those same lines, companies have to be efficient, they have to be profitable in order to maximize stock price. But that's the goal, is to maximize stock price, maximize shareholder wealth. Okay, so those are the main things for chapter 1. There's several multiple choice questions regarding chapter 1. So if you have studied those in depth, you'll be fine with that. Okay, and then for chapter 3, okay, you should be familiar with the financial statements and able to form basic calculations. So just go over these. Basically, the best way to study for this is to take a look at the balance sheet and take a look at the income statement, and just be familiar with those statements. And be able to ask basic questions. For example, be able to answer basic questions. For example, if you're looking at the balance sheet for 2 different years, you should be able to tell me, why did something increase and why did something decrease, or what increased and what decreased. If you look at an income statement, you should be able to tell me, what is the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization? What is the earnings before interest and taxes? So just make sure you go back and look at the quiz. Make sure you can understand. Make sure you understand just the basic balance sheet and income statement. Also take a look at the cash flow statement and look at the slides, and then also read in the book about the statement of cash flows and just basically be familiar with the statement of cash flows. And then be able to answer some conceptual questions about the different financial statements. All right, so I mentioned, well, let me, before I talk about the ratios, let me continue with chapter 3. So for example, you might be asked how to calculate the net working capital. Isn't in here, but let me write this down for you. So you might be asked to calculate the net working capital. The net working capital is simply current assets minus current liabilities. Or you might be asked to calculate the net operating working capital. The net operating working capital is current assets minus current liabilities minus notes payable, because you don't include the interest-bearing liabilities.
What about excess cash?
Excess? No, you're not going to be asked about excess. No,
Okay.
no. Okay, and then for chapter 4, go over the homework problem 23 and write all those ratios down. You should be able to calculate those ratios. Now, I mentioned last time, I had a note here about inventory turnover and the debt ratio. Those aren't, neither of those are included. Inventory turnover and the debt ratio is not on the exam, so don't worry about those ratios. I was mentioning with inventory turnover, sometimes you use sales and then other times it's calculated with cost of goods sold, but that's not on there, so don't worry about that question. And the debt ratio, don't worry, you don't have to, there's no debt ratio calculations on there either. You can also exclude, let's see here. The EV to EBITDA ratio, the very last one and on homework problem 4, you can skip that one too. EV to EBITDA. And the return on invested capital, ROIC, you can skip that one too. Okay, and just be familiar with what's on a balance sheet and what's on an income statement. So there's some conceptual questions about the financial statements. Okay, and so remember when you get to, for the income statement, the bottom line on the income statement is net income. And so what are the two things, where does that net income go? What are the two things that a company does with their net income? Exactly, yeah. So they're going to pay out dividends and then the rest is going to go towards retained earnings. Okay, and just be familiar with the cash flow statement. The cash flow from operations. There's 3 sections to the cash flow statement. Cash flow from operations, cash flow from financing activities, cash flow from investing activities. Be familiar with what each of those mean and what they could contain. Okay, so some of the ratios that you should definitely be familiar with are the net operating working capital, the current ratio, the quick ratio, oh, you should be familiar with the inventory turnover ratio. I'm sorry. There's not a calculation, but there's a concept question about the inventory turnover ratio. So just make sure you know what that is and can explain what it means. So read about that in the book. You should know how to calculate the DSO, days sales outstanding, total asset turnover, and the times interest earned. The ROE, the profit margin, and the PE ratio. Okay, so these are the formulas you definitely want to pay particular, or the ratios you definitely want to pay particular attention to.
Isn't it like, I'm sorry, so like, I have a question. So you said, I did say that we could use a page of formula sheets.
1 page, yeah. So you can have a one page front and back formulas only. But 1 page front and back formulas only. Okay. And if you want to write out what the formula, what it means, I mean, you don't have to have it like I have it here. You can write out what the formulas are.
If I say like wrote something down, like explain how the current ratio or liquidity ratios, or that be too much?
That's too much. But what I meant is instead of writing CR, you can write current ratio.
Okay.
Total assets divided by current assets divided by current liabilities.
Okay, actually, okay, I'll make sure to.
Okay, so it's just the ratios, but you can write the ratios out. You don't have to abbreviate them. Gabby?
What formulas should we focus on the most in chapter 3?
I don't, let me see. In chapter 3. Hang on a second. Okay. Hang on a second. The net operating working capital, which is on page 71. And the net working capital, which is on page 70. The operating income, or EBIT, which is on page 75. So read about the operating income, what it means, and then make sure you can calculate it. And then read about all these statements. And then the free cash flow, which is on page 82. But for example, they talk about the balance sheet, talk about the income statement, and then on the statement of cash flows, they talk about each section and what an increase and what a decrease is. So make sure that you read all that information. And then you should know the free cash flow formula on page 82. And then net operating working capital, of course, they have an example there on page 83. And then I don't think I have anything on EVA or MVA. Let me look real quick. A second. Okay, yeah, section 3.8, MVA and EVA, you can skip that section. Section 3.8, EVA and MVA, you can skip. And then the income tax section, you can skip. Okay, and so then for chapter 4, just concentrate on these ratios. these of course aren't ratios. But times interest earned, total asset turnover, day sales outstanding, current ratio, quick ratio, inventory turnover. There's a multiple choice question about that. And then the PE ratio, profit margin, and return on equity. And then you should also be familiar with who uses the ratios and what are some of the limitations of the ratios. Okay, did you have any questions? You want me to work any problems, or does anyone have any specific questions from the quiz or the homework?
Questions are beyond that now?
35, 36.
Let me see. 32, actually. 32 questions. So it's not a lot of questions. So that's why you really, want to know you need to know the material. Yes.
Is it just gonna be multiple choice or is it also gonna be short answer?
It's just multiple choice. Yeah. And it's mostly concept questions, more so than, maybe it's 40% problems, 60% concept questions. All right, so does anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, while you're studying, feel free to come to my office and I can help you if you have any specific questions. I'll be here the rest of the day. I will be here all day tomorrow and of course all day on Wednesday. So if you don't, does anyone have any other questions? You feeling good about the test or no? No?
I think I'm feeling pretty good about the test.
Okay. All right, well, if you want to stay and have any specific questions for me to work out, I'll be happy to do that. If not, if you feel comfortable to study on your own, you're fine. We're a little bit ahead. I'm trying to ease us back in after Hurricane Ida. That's why there's really nothing else to do today. It's more of a study session. So as you're studying, just come see me if you have any questions. I'll be happy to help you. Or if I'm not in my office, text me, call me, or email me. All right. So I'll see you all on Wednesday or in my office if you have any questions.